Now, from what I've heard, cosplaying can be quite expensive. So what if I told you that if you want the real look, you might need to shell out just a little bit more cash? As a fan of manga, anime, and watches, I always do that Leonardo pointing meme when a watch I vaguely recognize gets on screen, so today I wanted to present you some watches that I've been able to find, and we'll take a look at what kind of watches they are, as well as any neat details you may want to know about them. Note that I didn't just pick any watch, I specifically pick watches with enough detail shown that enable us to more or less tie it to a real life watch. So as cool as the Power Rangers Ninja Steel watch is, because it doesn't have a real life equivalent, I won't look at watches like that. Additionally, I obviously couldn't find every cameo, so if you know of any others, feel free to share in the comments and explain what watch it is. Let's start off with one of the classics, Kira's Omega Speedmaster from Death Note. Throughout the story of Death Note, Kira keeps up the appearance of an educated elite, and his pairing with the Omega Speedmaster goes quite nicely. One of the most iconic watches in history, the Omega Speedmaster is the flagship model of the watchmaker Omega, which you might also recognize from other media franchises like the more recent James Bond movies. The one that Kira is specifically wearing is hard to pinpoint down, though it is the most standard and recognizable version of the watch. It's not easy to see if this is the Speedmaster professional version or not, but considering the profile of Kira, I do think he would go for the professional version. His watch specifically has also been modded to be able to hide a small paper fragment of the Death Note that you can use in emergencies, so you won't find an exact replica anyhow. If you do want to get as close as possible for the look, the Speedmaster Professional retails for about $7,000 to $8,000, though you may be able to find one on the market for the $3,000 to $4,000 range. Speaking of iconic watches, another one of the most recognizable watches shows up in Darker Than Black. Before us is the legendary Rolex Submariner, and more specifically, this is the model that fans call the Kermit, due to its green bezel. If you ever see one in the wild, please make sure that this is the one with the black dial, as if this is the version with a green bezel and a green dial, that one's actually called the Hulk. The Kermit is actually rarer, being produced for only 7 years until Rolex discontinued the model in 2010, which squarely matches when Darker Than Black was airing in 2007. If you want to pick up this watch, because it hasn't been in production for over a decade, the price has shot up quite a bit from its original retail price of $6,400, now sitting near the $14,000 range. Let's not stray too far, as we have another Rolex to look at, this time in 2017's Terra in Resonance, or its Japanese name, Zano No Tera. Without going too deep into the characters, as it kind of spoils the story, there are two characters named 9 and 12, who can both be seen with Rolex GMT Master 2s. 9 is wearing the Pepsi, called that because of its blue and red bezel, while 12 can be seen with the Coke, also called that for its choice of color scheme of red and black. If you ever think of cosplaying one or the other, the Pepsi clocks in at a retail price of $10,700, though you'll see them floating around in the market near the $20,000 range. The Coke, however, may be a little bit harder to find, as it was discontinued in 2007, though you'll find secondhand ones in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. And watches appearing in anime isn't really a modern phenomena either. In the classic Lupin the Third anime, the legendary thief can often be seen with his trusty Zenith Chronomaster, which makes sense for his scheming purposes. What's really cool is that Zenith also acknowledges its appearance in the anime with their 2022 collaboration with Lupin the Third, bringing to life the Chronomaster in 3 styles. One with a black dial, one with a white dial like in the show, and one split 50-50 in black and white. If you want to pick up the white dial one that most closely resembles the one in the show, that'll cost you something in the ballpark of $9,000. But if, like me, your budget for these kind of things are a little bit tighter, let's look at some of our more affordable anime equivalents. In the anime film 5 centimeters per second, one of our main characters, Tono Takaki, can be seen with another iconic watch, though this time with a much more reasonable price tag. On our good sir's wrist is the Casio GShock G2500, though its name does seem scrambled on the watch itself, probably for copyright reasons, which we'll see come up quite often. We'll be talking about quite a few Casios in just a little bit, so let's do a quick rundown of them. As one of the largest watchmakers in the world, Casio is a Japanese brand, which would make sense for them to appear in anime. More importantly, their G-Shock line is a physically durable, digital, often feature-rich, and reasonably priced, while also having their own feel and style, which makes them popular with quite a wide array of people. G-Shocks also vary a lot in look, style, and shape, so we'll see quite a few of them around. Now with that said, because Casio provides breadth rather than depth, as in they have a lot of styles, but each of that specific style doesn't have quite a large backlog, it can be quite difficult to find something exact, though you'll have a really easy time to find something similar. In regards to Tono's watch, if you're able to find a new one around, it shouldn't cost you any more than a cool $100. Continuing on the Casio train, we can look at 2014's anime Fruit of Grisaya, or Grisaya no Kajitsu, and its main character Kazami Yuji, who can be seen walking around with a Casio of his own, this time being the Casio GShock DW5600. Like we discussed earlier, although they're both G-Shocks, they do vary wildly in appearance, don't they? I actually own a variation of this watch, and if you shop around, you'll find quite a few watches of this look and style, each with their own distinct accents. If you want to get this watch ASAP, however, the good news is that this is probably the most accessible watch on this list, as you can find this model for something that's as close as it gets to half a hundo. What a steal. Looking at again some affordable Casios, one shows up in Initial D. Now, I will be honest and say that due to how old the anime is, it's not as obvious what this watch is, though my guess is that it's the Casio WS1300H in black, with both a tide graph and a moon phase. And how much would all this cost? Well, you will need to shell out a little bit more than a 20, unfortunately. The last Casio I wanted to talk about shows up in Gintama, and hilariously, the watch is called a Casio in the show, though with a K rather than a C. This one is the Casio A168, which is a simple yet feature-rich watch that shouldn't be scoffed at, especially at its price rivaling the previous ones. I don't personally like this watch because of the way it pulls on my arm hair, but if you're someone who isn't worried about that kind of thing, pick this up on your next drunken night to complete that Gintama cosplay. On the topic of affordable, did you know that liking and subscribing is completely free? Well, if you didn't, that's just my PSA. Let's move on. Staying within the affordable category but moving away from Casio, we can look at one of the most legendary series out there in Dragon Ball. For all you OG Dragon Ball fans, Bulma actually did appear originally sporting a watch of her own. With its bright red band, this watch is probably the Swatch Red Pass GR162. Much like Casio, Swatch is also a watchmaker that specializes in quartz watches, and their rise was meteoric, as within the first decade since it opened in 1983, they gobbled up quite a large number of other watchmakers to the point that nowadays, Swatch is the biggest player in the watch industry. This also matches up with the Dragon Ball manga's history, as it premiered in Weekly Shonen Jump in 1984. Similar to how we talked about Casio's, Swatch's early strategy was quite similar, as it offered watches at a reasonable price with varying styles so that customers can really pick the one that they like without necessarily breaking the bank. With that said, while the watch could have originally been found for the $20 to $40 range, if you want to find this exact watch in today's market, expect to pay upwards of $100 to $120 for one in good working condition. Well, that's it. I'm fresh out of anime watches, so let's end this video off with a little bit of manga with JoJo. Now, JoJo has always been very fashion forward, so it's not a surprise that some fancy watches do show up. In this one particular panel, we have laid out 4 incredible watches, each spectacular in their own way. On the far left is the JLC, or GG Lecoultre, Master Tourbillon, and it is so far the most expensive watch we have on the menu, clocking in at a respectable $32,000. Granted, this watch has historically been known to be a true luxury, so don't bankrupt yourself going for it. Next to it is the Ralph Lauren Stirrup, and while Ralph Lauren isn't really a watchmaker by trade, this one in particular does stand up from their inventory, and if it interests you, this one is available on their website for a neat $3,000. Moving on is the Bulgari Lucia White Shell, which is made of white gold and bedazzled with gems to form a bracelet. There is very little information on this watch in general, with the best I can find is for a used one clocking in at a smidge over $10,000. And finally, last but not least, to end our little watch journey, is a Rolex Day-Day Platinum Ice Blue Arabic dial with a diamond bezel, meaning there are diamonds encrusted onto the round ring. I personally think this is a little bit too tacky with how over the top it is, but if you don't and want to go ahead and snag this up, I was able to find this model online for an affordable $160,000. All in all, I hope this video helped open your eyes to what some of your favorite characters might be wearing on their wrists. While we have looked at a lot of expensive watches, we've also looked at quite a few classic affordable watches that are worthy of just as much respect. So if you are a watch enthusiast who enjoyed them being depicted in anime, or an anime fan interested in watches, I hope you enjoyed. Have a nice one, dummies. See you next video.